At a luxury family event, she heard her billionaire husband tell his mother, "My wife will cry when I divorce her on her birthday." She was pregnant and overheard her tech mogul husband whispering to his mother, "On her birthday, I'll end it. She will cry and you'll finally have your son back." But by the time the candles burned down, the only tears in the room were not hers. "Hi, my most beautiful family. Let me start with prayer. May every wife who has been told she is not enough for a powerful family walk with her head high. May every woman who has been silenced find her voice. May every daughter and mother be honored, not diminished. And may no woman watching ever be humiliated in front of strangers. Amen." Let's start with love. And please click that subscribe button. Let's begin. Dawn broke over the Witzel Penthouse Terrace, painting the city skyline in shades of gold and rose. Sharon stood barefoot on the cool marble, wrapped in Richard's oversized white shirt, watching the world wake up 60 floors below. "There you are," Richard's voice was warm behind her, carrying 2 coffee cups, despite the fact that they employed a full kitchen staff. It was a small ritual he refused to surrender, making her morning coffee himself, measuring the cream exactly how she liked it. Sharon turned, her heart doing that ridiculous flutter it still did after a full year of marriage. Richard Witzel, tech billionaire, real estate mogul, man who commanded boardrooms full of sharks, stood there in rumpled pajama pants and nothing else, looking at her like she was the only fortune that mattered. "You're supposed to be sleeping," she teased, accepting the cup and breathing in the familiar vanilla hazelnut blend. "I was going to surprise you with breakfast." "You're the best part of every morning," he murmured, setting down his cup to pull her into a gentle embrace. "The first thing I want to see when I wake up and the last thought before I sleep. You're every good moment in between." She laughed, that free, unguarded sound she'd forgotten she could make until she met him. "You're ridiculous." "I'm in love." His blue eyes held hers with an intensity that still made her breath catch. "Do you know what I was thinking about when I woke up and you weren't there? That you need better security on the terrace doors? That out of every deal I've ever closed, every property I've ever acquired, every company I've ever built." He tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear, with infinite gentleness. "You are my real fortune. Everything else is just numbers on a screen. You're the only thing that made me human again." Sharon felt tears prick her eyes. This was the man her friends from her old neighborhood couldn't quite believe existed. The one who left handwritten notes in her skincare drawer that said things like, "Missed you while you were sleeping," and insisted on carrying her heels after charity galas, because "your feet deserve rest after making me look good all night." "Dance with me," Richard said suddenly, taking her coffee and setting it aside. "There's no music." "There's always music when I'm with you." And so they danced in the dawn light, his arms solid around her waist, her head against his chest where she could hear his heartbeat, steady, strong, hers. The city below was starting to hum with life, but up here, wrapped in Richard's warmth, Sharon felt like they existed in a world built just for two. "You know what I love most about you?" Richard whispered against her hair. "My devastating wit," she teased. "Your realness." His voice turned serious. "You still look at all this." He gestured at the sprawling penthouse behind them, the infinity pool catching the sunrise, the private elevator that opened directly into their home. "Like it's not quite real, like you haven't been corrupted by it." Sharon pulled back to look at him. "That's because where I come from, luxury meant my mom saving up for 3 months to take me to that Italian restaurant on 5th Street, the one with the red checkered tablecloths and the waiter who always remembered our names." Richard's expression softened. "Tell me about her. Your mom." They moved to the terrace lounge, still swaying slightly as Sharon painted pictures with her words. "She worked double shifts as a nurse but never missed a single school play. She taught me that elegance isn't about what you wear. It's about how you treat people when no one important is watching. That love isn't loud. It's showing up consistently, even when it's hard." "She raised an extraordinary woman," Richard said quietly. "She raised me to believe that people matter more than things, that kindness is never weakness." Sharon traced patterns on his bare shoulder. "Sometimes I worry I don't fit in your world, Richard. At those galas when everyone's discussing art auctions and European estates." "Stop." He cupped her face. forcing her to meet his eyes. You don't need to fit into my world. You are my world now. Everything else is just scenery. Later, as Richard showered and prepared for an early board meeting, Sharon wandered through their bedroom suite. She opened her skincare drawer to find a new note tucked between her serums, written in Richard's distinctive architectural handwriting. Watching you sleep is my favorite form of meditation. You make even breathing look like poetry. R. She pressed the note to her heart, adding it to the growing collection she kept in a silk box. 23 notes in 12 months. 23 small pieces of evidence that this brilliant, powerful man chose tenderness over empire every single time. Found it? Richard called from the bathroom, and she could hear the smile in his voice. You're going to make me cry before breakfast. That's the plan. Keep you so emotionally destroyed by my charm that you never leave me. She laughed, but something in his words tugged at her. The idea of leaving, of this ending, it felt impossible. Surely nothing could break something this strong. That evening, after Richard returned from back-to-back meetings, they attended a charity gala at the Museum of Modern Art. Sharon wore a midnight blue gown that Richard had chosen himself, and she watched him command the room, shaking hands, making donors laugh, moving through the crowd like the king of an invisible empire. But every 10 minutes, his eyes would find hers across the room. Every time that same look. Are you okay? Do you need me? When the evening finally ended and they climbed into the town car, Sharon slipped off her heels with a grateful sigh. Don't even think about it, Richard said, scooping up her shoes before she could. These are my responsibility now. Richard, we have staff. I don't care if we have 100 staff members. Your feet carried you through 4 hours of small talk with people half as interesting as you. The least I can do is carry your weapons of war. He grinned, holding up the designer heels. Besides, it's husband-law. Section 3, paragraph 12. Thou shalt always carry thy wife's uncomfortable shoes. You're ridiculous. I'm yours. Back home, after Richard finally fell asleep, his arm draped possessively across her waist, even in unconsciousness. Sharon lay awake, studying his face in the dim light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. His dark hair fell across his forehead like a boy's. In sleep, the CEO disappeared, leaving only the man who danced with her on terraces and wrote love notes like prayers. She'd grown up in a small apartment where the radiator clanked and her mother stretched every dollar. Now she lived in the clouds, married to a man whose watch cost more than her childhood home. It felt like a fairy tale. But as she traced the strong line of Richard's jaw with her eyes, careful not to wake him, a whisper of unease moved through her chest. She'd read enough stories to know that fairy tales always had a cost. Every dynasty has a price, she thought, pulling his arm tighter around herself. I just hope I can afford it. Outside, the city glittered like scattered diamonds, beautiful and cold, and Sharon closed her eyes against a future she couldn't yet see coming. The Witzel Family Foundation Gala was held in a crystalline venue overlooking the harbor. Glass walls, floating chandeliers, and a string quartet playing Mozart like a whispered prayer. Sharon stood before the bathroom mirror, silently rehearsing names she'd memorized from Richard's donor files. Teresa Owens, tech investor. Davis Rothschild, real estate. Amanda Prescott Vanderberg, old money. 3 hyphenated names, don't forget. You're going to be perfect, Richard said from the doorway, looking devastating in his custom tuxedo. He crossed to her, adjusting the diamond necklace at her throat, a Witzel heirloom he'd insisted she wear. Stop worrying. Easy for you to say. You were born knowing these people. And they're going to love you just like I do. He kissed her temple. Trust me. But 90 minutes into the gala, as Sharon navigated small talk with a tech CEO's wife, a ripple moved through the crowd. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Heads turned toward the entrance like flowers following the sun. A Rolls-Royce Phantom, gleaming black, pulled up to the red carpet. Evelyn Witzel stepped out in a silver gown that looked like liquid mercury poured over ice. Diamonds older than some countries glittered at her throat and wrists. Her white blonde hair was swept into a flawless chignon, and her posture belonged to someone who'd never doubted her right to any room she entered. Even the staff seemed to freeze, as if the real power had finally arrived. Richard materialized at Sharon's side, his hand finding hers. That's my mother. Evelyn moved through the crowd like a queen reviewing her subjects, stopping to air kiss important donors, murmuring in French to a European ambassador. When she finally reached Richard and Sharon, her smile was perfectly calibrated, warm enough to photograph well, cool enough to establish hierarchy. Richard, darling, she offered her cheek, and Richard kissed it obediently. Then those ice blue eyes settled on Sharon. And this must be the bride. Mother, this is Sharon. Sharon, my mother, Evelyn Witzel. Evelyn's cheek kiss was feather light, almost non-contact. How lovely to finally meet you properly. And what a charming dress, so sweet. Almost perfect for an evening like this. Almost. The word landed like a paper cut, small but stinging. Thank you, Sharon managed. Richard helped me choose it. How thoughtful of him. Evelyn's gaze swept over her once more, before turning to Richard. Darling, you haven't greeted the Vanderhaven family? They've been waiting. As the evening progressed, Evelyn positioned herself strategically near Sharon during donor conversations, interjecting with surgical precision. Sharon is still adjusting to our world, aren't you, dear? It must be quite overwhelming coming from such a different background. The foundation work can be complex, so many moving parts, but I'm sure with time, Sharon will understand how we operate in these circles. And later, to a cluster of board members. Richard has always had such a generous heart, sometimes too generous, choosing with emotion rather than strategy. Each comment was delivered with a sympathetic smile, as if she were being helpful rather than slowly dismantling Sharon's credibility. Richard tried to smooth things over with jokes. Mother, stop scaring my wife. But Sharon noticed how quickly his demeanor shifted when Evelyn corrected him about foundation protocols. The confident CEO became an obedient son, deferring, apologizing. Of course, Mother. You're right. I'll handle it your way. Back at the penthouse, Sharon kicked off her heels and collapsed on the sofa. Your mother hates me. She doesn't hate you. Richard loosened his bow tie. She's just intense and protective, but she's loving underneath all that ice. She said my dress was almost appropriate, Richard. That's just her way. She was the same with my father at first. He sat beside her, pulling her against him. Give her time. She'll warm up, I promise. Sharon wanted to believe him, but something in Evelyn's eyes, that cold assessment, that calculating pause before each smile, said otherwise. Miles away, in the back of her chauffeured Mercedes, Evelyn Witzel studied a photograph on her phone. Richard and Sharon on their wedding day, his face radiant with joy, hers glowing with love. Sentimental choices, Evelyn murmured to the empty car, her manicured finger tracing Sharon's face on the screen. Dynasties are not built on sentimental choices, my darling boy. She deleted the photo with a single tap. They're built on knowing who truly belongs. Just until the foundation audit is complete, Evelyn announced, directing movers toward the East Wing guest suite. 2 weeks, 3 at most. You don't mind, do you, Sharon? It wasn't really a question. Within 48 hours, the penthouse, Sharon's home, her sanctuary, began to feel different, smaller. Evelyn's presence filled rooms like expensive perfume, pleasant at first but overwhelming in concentration. Staff who once asked Sharon about dinner preferences now waited for Evelyn's nod before proceeding. Mrs. Witzel prefers the Limoges china for evening service, Evelyn informed the housekeeper, as if Sharon, also Mrs. Witzel, wasn't standing right there. The first real strike came during a high-profile fundraiser at the penthouse. Sharon had spent weeks planning the event, choosing every detail, including the placement of a stunning Dale Chihuly glass sculpture, swirling blues and greens that reminded her of ocean waves. Richard had bought it for their 6-month anniversary because she'd stood mesmerized in front of it at a gallery. 2 hours before guests arrived, Evelyn redirected the catering staff to rearrange the entire entrance layout. The sculpture shattered. The sound of a $250,000 art piece exploding on marble was distinctive, a crystalline scream that brought everyone running. Oh, how devastating, Evelyn said, her hand at her throat. Sharon, darling, didn't you brief the staff about fragile placement protocols? I, I did. I told them exactly. Richard appeared, his face dark. What happened? An unfortunate accident, Evelyn said smoothly. I'm sure Sharon meant well, but when hosting at this level, precise instructions are critical. One small miscommunication, and she gestured at the glittering shards. Richard turned to Sharon, and for the first time since their wedding, she saw disappointment in his eyes. You should have double-checked. That piece was irreplaceable. Richard, I didn't. It's all right, Evelyn interjected, her voice honey-sweet. We all make mistakes when we're learning. I'll help you understand the protocols, dear. We can't have future mishaps at events like these. The fundraiser proceeded flawlessly after that, but Sharon felt like she was watching someone else's party in someone else's home. Over the following week, Evelyn began updating the penthouse decor. Your touches are lovely, Sharon, very homey. But when Richard hosts the kind of people who shape industries, the space needs to reflect that gravitas. The cozy throw blankets Sharon had chosen disappeared. The family photos she'd arranged were replaced by abstract art that looked like expensive anger. The warm lighting she loved gave way to stark gallery spots. Even the scented candles, vanilla and cedar, Richard's favorites, were swapped for unscented pillars. The penthouse transformed into a museum. Beautiful, cold, untouchable. At dinner with Richard's longtime friends, old money with older manners, Evelyn casually dropped a name Sharon had never heard. Lydia sends her regards, Richard. She's doing remarkable work with the Metropolitan Museum Board. That's wonderful, Richard said neutrally. Such a shame you two didn't work out. But then Lydia understood these rooms, didn't she? Spoke the language of legacy. Evelyn smiled at Sharon. Not everyone is raised for this world, but that doesn't make them less valuable in their own way. Sharon's fork felt heavy. She set it down carefully, afraid her trembling hands would betray her. That night, Richard found her on the terrace, wrapped in a blanket that had somehow escaped Evelyn's purge. Hey! He pulled her against him. Mother's just old-fashioned. She doesn't mean anything by it. She replaced everything I chose for our home. It's still our home. He kissed her hair. She'll be gone soon, and we'll put it back however you want. But the throw blankets stayed gone. The photos stayed in storage. The museum aesthetic remained. And in the morning, when Sharon stood alone in the living room, she no longer recognized all sharp edges and cold surfaces. She realized something terrifying. She couldn't remember when she'd stopped feeling like this penthouse belonged to her. She couldn't remember when she'd started feeling like a guest in her own life. Darling, that dress is lovely, so sweet and provincial. But for the Goldman reception, you'll need something with more. Evelyn paused delicately. Authority. I've arranged for my stylist to meet you Tuesday. Sharon looked down at the navy sheath she'd chosen. Richard had said she looked beautiful in it just last week. I'm protecting my son's reputation, Evelyn continued, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. You understand, don't you? When you stand beside Richard, you're representing the entire Witzel legacy. The stylist arrived with racks of severe black suits and structured gowns that looked like elegant armor. Nothing soft, nothing warm, nothing that felt like Sharon. At the next foundation board meeting, a donor directed a question to Sharon about allocation strategies for youth programs, an area she'd actually researched extensively. Before Sharon could respond, Evelyn laughed lightly. Oh, let's not bog Sharon down with numbers. They give her such headaches, don't they, dear? Richard, why don't you explain the allocation model? Richard did, smoothly, without even glancing at Sharon. It happened again at a dinner with potential sponsors, and again during a strategy session with board members. Each time, Evelyn's gentle redirection. Each time, the room accepting it as natural. When Sharon tried to contribute ideas, Richard would smile indulgently. Why don't you let the professionals handle the technical details, sweetheart? You're the heart of this foundation. That's your gift. The heart, not the brain, never the brain. She heard Evelyn's words coming out of her husband's mouth, and something inside her cracked a little more. Sharon poured herself into organizing a foundation project that mattered, partnering with a local elementary school in her old neighborhood to create an after-school arts program. She visited the school 3 times, met with teachers, connected with families who reminded her of her mother. The principal cried when Sharon promised funding. This will change lives, Sharon told Richard excitedly, showing him the budget proposal. He smiled. That's wonderful. Run it by Mother first. She knows the optics. 2 days later, Evelyn announced a glamorous gala partnership with the Metropolitan Opera's youth program instead. High profile, press-friendly, and utterly impersonal. We can't spread resources too thin, Evelyn explained at the board meeting. The opera initiative will get us on the society pages. Your little school project is charming, Sharon, but it doesn't align with our strategic visibility goals. The elementary school principal's grateful voice still echoed in Sharon's ears when she had to call and cancel. She started noticing other things. Staff members going quiet when she entered rooms. Cousins at family dinners asking gentle, pitying questions. How are you adjusting, Sharon? It must be so overwhelming. One afternoon, she overheard Evelyn speaking softly to the housekeeper. Be patient with Mrs. Witzel, the younger Mrs. Witzel. She's struggling to adapt. This world is very different from what she knew. By the time Sharon walked into any room, the story was already written. Poor thing, trying so hard, just doesn't quite fit. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night. Your mother is erasing me, Sharon said, her voice shaking. Can't you see what she's doing? Richard looked up from his laptop, irritated. She's trying to help you. Help me? Richard, she canceled my school program. Because it wasn't strategic. Sharon, you're overreacting. I'm overreacting? The words felt like a slap. I'm watching my husband turn into a stranger, and I'm overreacting? My mother has run this foundation for 20 years. Maybe, just maybe, you should trust her judgment instead of taking everything so personally. She's not helping me. She's replacing me. God, Sharon. Richard closed his laptop hard. Do you hear yourself? Mother has been nothing but gracious, and you're acting paranoid. He left, just stood up and walked to his study, leaving her standing there with tears streaming down her face. That night, Sharon stood alone on the terrace where they used to dance at dawn. The city glittered below, indifferent and cold. Somewhere behind her, Richard was sleeping, or working, or avoiding her. She didn't even know anymore. She had never felt more lonely in her life. Not when she was single, not when her father left, not ever. Because loneliness in an empty room is bearable, but loneliness in a glittering palace, with the man you love just rooms away, slowly forgetting who you are, that kind of loneliness has no bottom. Antonio had driven for the Witzel family for 15 years. Quiet, reliable, the kind of man who remembered everyone's coffee order and never gossiped. When Sharon found him crying in the garage, his hands shaking on the steering wheel, she didn't hesitate. My daughter, he choked out. Leukemia. The treatments. Insurance won't cover the specialist she needs. I'm going to lose our apartment. I'm going to lose everything. Sharon sat beside him in the back seat, let him cry on her shoulder, and quietly pulled out her personal card. How much do you need? Mrs. Witzel, I can't. Yes, you can. Family takes care of family. She transferred the money that afternoon, hugged him in the parking garage, told him to focus on his daughter, that everything else would work itself out. She didn't know Evelyn had installed additional security cameras after the art incident. 3 days later, Richard came home early. His face was stone. My office now. He wouldn't look at her as he opened his laptop, turned the screen to face her. Surveillance footage edited into a damning narrative. Sharon and Antonio in the back seat, her arms around him. Text messages, her asking when he'd be free, transferring money saying, don't tell Richard. Richard, that's not, I have been such a fool. His voice was ice over broken glass. My mother tried to warn me. She said you were too interested in the staff, too comfortable with people who work for us. Antonio's daughter has cancer. I was helping. With money and secret meetings? With messages you specifically hid from me? He stood, towering over her. Were you involved with him, or was it just emotional? Tell me, Sharon, did you practice looking at me with those innocent eyes while you were playing me for access to my life? How can you even... Richard, it's me. You know me. I thought I did. His laugh was ugly. God, I thought I knew you. Turns out our entire marriage was a beautiful illusion. You played the sweet, simple girl from the modest background, and I ate it up like an idiot. Please. She reached for him, but he stepped back like her touch was poison. Please, just call Antonio. Ask him. Look at the hospital records. My mother already verified everything. The timestamps on those messages, the money transfers while I was traveling, the way you two looked at each other. He moved toward the door. I'm moving into the West Wing. My lawyers will be in touch. Richard, I love you. Don't. The word was sharp enough to draw blood. Don't insult me with that anymore. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot. Later, Sharon heard voices drifting from Richard's study. She didn't mean to eavesdrop. Or maybe she did, desperately seeking any lifeline. You were right, Mother. Richard's voice was broken. You tried to tell me, and I was too blinded by... Hush, darling. Evelyn's voice was pure maternal comfort. You have a generous heart. She took advantage of that. But you're safe now. I'll take care of everything. You'll have your life back. Sharon stood frozen in the hallway, listening to her husband find comfort in the arms of the woman destroying them. She made it back to the bedroom before the dam broke, collapsed on the floor, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe, found one of Richard's old notes in her drawer. Watching you sleep is my favorite form of meditation, and clutched it like a talisman against a curse. This wasn't about a difficult mother-in-law anymore. This was about survival. She stumbled to the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. Hollow eyes, gaunt cheeks, a ghost wearing her face. I'm disappearing, she whispered to her reflection. She's erasing me, and Richard's letting her. If she did nothing, if she kept being the understanding wife, the patient daughter-in-law, the woman who never fought back, Evelyn wouldn't just win Richard. She'd win everything, including the pieces of Sharon that still remembered who she was before this glittering prison. Sharon spent 3 days assembling the collage. Photos from their wedding, ticket stubs from that awful comedy show where they'd laughed until they cried, pressed flowers from their first anniversary. Pathetic, maybe, trying to remind him of who they used to be with a scrapbook. But she was desperate. Richard's study was supposed to be off limits now, but she had the code. She'd find the perfect spot on his wall, leave it as a surprise, a bridge back to each other. The documents were scattered across his desk. Corporate letterhead, dense legal language. She almost ignored them. Then she saw her name. Sharon Marie Witzel, co-trustee and equal signatory, Witzel Holdings International LLC. Her hands trembled as she read. Post-marriage restructuring for tax optimization and public image. A key holding company controlling real estate assets, tech investments, commercial properties across 3 continents. And according to these papers, she wasn't just Richard's wife. She was his legal equal, half-owner, co-controller of decisions worth billions. I'm not powerless, she whispered to the empty room. The realization hit like lightning. All this time, while Evelyn was treating her like hired help, and Richard was questioning her worth, she'd held actual legal power. She just hadn't known it existed. Later that afternoon, the nausea that had been plaguing her for a week sent her to her doctor. She'd assumed it was stress, heartbreak manifesting physically. Congratulations, Mrs. Witzel. You're about 8 weeks along. The world tilted. Sharon stared at the ultrasound screen, at the tiny flutter that would become her child, and felt joy and terror crash together in her chest. A baby. Richard's baby. Their baby. But Richard thought she was a liar. He'd moved into another wing of the house like she was contaminated. If she told him now, in his current state, would he think this was manipulation too? Another trap? I need to keep this confidential, Sharon said quietly. Don't send any records to my home. I'll collect them directly. She had to protect this life, even from its own father. Back in the penthouse, Sharon did something she'd never done before. She started investigating. If she had legal power in Witzel Holdings, she had access rights to foundation documents too. She requested routine financial reports, the kind donors could review. The irregularities jumped out once she knew to look for them. Unexplained transfers from the foundation's scholarship fund to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. expense reports that didn't match event receipts, payments to a shell company called Ashford Consulting, a name that appeared nowhere in legitimate foundation correspondence, all tied to accounts Evelyn personally managed. "What are you hiding?" Sharon murmured, cross-referencing dates and amounts. That night, she sat in Richard's dark study, his former study, before Evelyn poisoned everything. The corporate documents were spread before her. Foundation reports with their damning inconsistencies stacked beside them, and her hand resting on her still flat stomach, protecting the flutter of life growing there. She hadn't chosen this war. She'd only wanted to love Richard, to build a life together. But Evelyn had made her choice for her, and Richard had believed every lie. "I may not be able to save my marriage," Sharon whispered to the baby, to herself, to the empty penthouse that used to be home. "But I won't let her destroy you too." She looked at the documents, evidence of her power, evidence of Evelyn's corruption, and felt something shift inside her chest. Fear transforming into fury, grief hardening into strategy. "If she wants a war," Sharon said quietly, "she's about to learn that the simple girl knows how to fight back." The private island resort looked like something from a fantasy. White sand beaches, glass villas perched over turquoise water, staff who materialized silently to fulfill needs before they were spoken. The Witzel family's strategic retreat was scheduled for 4 days, culminating in an early celebration of Sharon's birthday. "How thoughtful," Sharon had said flatly when Evelyn announced it. She was 10 weeks pregnant now, and the morning sickness had transformed into a strange, glowing energy. She caught herself resting her hand on her stomach, then forcing it away before anyone noticed. Richard remained polite, distant. He held doors for her like she was a stranger, sat beside her at meals but never touched her. When she tried to catch his eye across the dinner table, he looked through her. "Richard has always put family first," Evelyn announced during the welcome toast, her voice carrying across the terrace. "Sometimes at great personal cost. He understands duty, sacrifice, the kind of commitment that separates dynasties from ordinary families." Her eyes found Sharon on the word ordinary. The days blurred together, group activities designed to showcase Witzel unity, business discussions that excluded Sharon, photographs staged to look candid but carefully curated to minimize her presence. She felt like a ghost haunting someone else's vacation. On the third evening, Sharon couldn't bear another minute of suffocating politeness. She slipped away from the group dinner, needing air, needing space, needing to remember how to breathe. The pool area was deserted, or so she thought. Then she heard voices from the shadowed cabana. "You're sure about the timing?" Evelyn's voice low and satisfied. "On her birthday." Richard sounded tired, defeated. "It's already arranged. The papers are drafted." Sharon froze behind a column of night-blooming jasmine. "And you're prepared for the scene she'll make?" Evelyn pressed. "She'll cry. She'll beg. But it has to be done." A pause. "You were right, Mother, about everything." "Of course I was, darling. On her birthday, you end it, she breaks down, and you'll finally be free. I'll have my son back." The words should have shattered her. A month ago, they would have driven her to her knees. Instead, Sharon felt something cold and clear settle over her like armor. She walked back to her villa in a strange state of calm, her mind replaying 12 months of marriage like a film. Richard's love notes, Evelyn's poison, the slow erosion of trust, the manufactured affair. She saw it all now, the entire architecture of the betrayal. In her room, she pulled out her laptop and the hidden copies of documents she'd made, stared at them in the lamplight. She could run, take her legal share, disappear, raise her baby far from this dynasty and its cruelty. But then she thought of Antonio, nearly destroyed by lies. The foundation families who depended on money Evelyn was stealing. The life inside her that deserved a father who knew truth from manipulation. At 2 in the morning, Sharon walked to the edge of the island. Waves crashed against volcanic rock below, relentless and powerful. She stood there, one hand on her stomach, and began to plan. 3 truths, 3 gifts for her birthday. First, her legal co-ownership of Witzel Holdings. Let them see she was never the powerless gold digger they'd painted. Second, Evidence of Evelyn's corruption. Let the woman who weaponized legacy and reputation lose both in front of everyone she needed to impress. Third, the baby. Let Richard understand exactly what his betrayal almost cost him. I didn't choose this war, Sharon whispered to the waves, to her unborn child, to the version of herself she was becoming. But I'm going to finish it. When she walked back to her villa, she wasn't the wounded wife anymore. She was something far more dangerous. A woman with nothing left to lose and everything to expose. The lawyer's office was in a discreet building in Midtown, the kind of place where confidentiality was purchased by the hour. Mrs. Witzel, based on these documents, your position is considerably stronger than you realize. The attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Reed, spread the corporate papers across her mahogany desk. As co-trustee and equal signatory, any major decisions regarding Witzel Holdings International require your explicit consent. A divorce on his terms would trigger automatic reviews and potential restructuring that could cost him operational control of several key assets. Sharon absorbed this quietly. So I'm not powerless. Far from it. You're a legal partner in one of the largest private holdings on the East Coast. Back at the penthouse, Sharon worked methodically. She cross-referenced foundation reports going back 3 years, building an undeniable paper trail. The offshore payments to Ashford Consulting led to a shell company registered to one Edward Ashford, a name that appeared in exactly 3 places. Property records for a Mediterranean villa, a society page photograph with Evelyn from 5 years ago, and a single invoice for strategic consulting services worth $2 million. Evelyn's hidden lover, funded by stolen foundation money meant for scholarships and children's programs. Sharon compiled everything, bank statements, forged signatures, photographic evidence, and had it independently verified by a forensic accountant. Irrefutable. At her doctor's office, she requested formal documentation, a detailed letter confirming the pregnancy, estimated conception date, and early ultrasound images showing the tiny form that would become her child. She stored them in a sealed envelope, handling it like sacred proof. Something shifted in Sharon after the island. She stopped flinching at Evelyn's remarks. When the older woman commented that her dress looked tired, Sharon simply smiled and said, "How observant." When Evelyn rearranged the dinner seating to place Sharon at the far end of the table, away from Richard, Sharon thanked her for the thoughtful placement near the window. The calm unnerved Evelyn. Sharon saw it in the way her mother-in-law's eyes narrowed, assessing, trying to locate the wound to press. But Sharon had moved beyond wounding. Richard noticed too. One morning he found her in the kitchen making coffee, their old ritual, and stopped in the doorway. "You seem," he searched for the word, "different." "Do I?" She met his eyes without the desperate pleading he'd grown accustomed to. Just calm acknowledgement. "Sharon, He faltered, something uncertain flickering across his face, but his pride wouldn't let him continue. He turned away, leaving her standing there with 2 coffee cups and a small sad smile. Sharon took control of planning her own birthday dinner. She chose the menu carefully, selected a guest list that included key board members, foundation donors, and family allies Evelyn had cultivated for years. She arranged for crystal, orchids, candles, made it beautiful, made it memorable, made it the perfect stage. "How involved you are in your own party planning," Evelyn remarked, watching Sharon confirm the floral arrangements. "Most women would be too emotional." "I want everything to be perfect," Sharon replied smoothly. "It's going to be a night no one forgets." The evening before her birthday, Sharon sat at her dressing table and laid out 3 sealed envelopes. Ivory paper, her name written on each in careful script. Gift 1. Corporate documents proving her legal co-ownership. Gift 2. Financial evidence exposing Evelyn's corruption and hidden relationship. Gift 3. Medical confirmation of her pregnancy. She rested one hand on her stomach, where the baby grew, unaware of the storm coming. "This is going to hurt," she whispered. "It's going to hurt both of us. But it's also going to set us free. Tomorrow the truth would detonate. Tomorrow the dynasty would learn that the woman they'd tried to erase had been taking notes the entire time." The penthouse had been transformed into a floating garden. Thousands of white orchids cascaded from crystal chandeliers, candlelight dancing off marble and glass. A string quartet played Vivaldi. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glittered like scattered diamonds. Guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos murmured appreciation for the elegant perfection of it all. Sharon descended the stairs in a champagne silk gown that hugged her still-hidden pregnancy. Her hair swept up to reveal the diamond earrings Richard had given her on their wedding day. She looked serene, untouchable, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with clothes or jewels and everything to do with a woman who had finally stopped apologizing for existing. Richard watched her approach, his rehearsed speech suddenly feeling inadequate. Something in her eyes had changed, but the papers were already prepared. Evelyn was waiting. He couldn't back down now. After dinner, after champagne toast that Sharon didn't drink, after cake and well wishes, Richard stood, cleared his throat, began his carefully worded speech about honest conversations and different paths. "Before you continue," Sharon interrupted, her voice calm and clear, "I have some birthday gifts to share. 3 to be exact." She opened the first envelope, handed copies to Richard, to key board members, to Evelyn's closest allies. "My first gift is clarity about who I actually am in this family. According to these corporate documents, filed by your own attorneys, Richard, I am co-trustee and equal signatory of Witzel Holdings International." She let that sink in. Any divorce proceeding would trigger automatic asset reviews and require my consent for restructuring. "I'm not a powerless gold digger. I'm your legal partner." The room rippled with shock. Richard's face went white. "My second gift is for Evelyn." Sharon opened the second envelope, her hands steady. "Foundation financial records showing systematic misappropriation of funds. Payments to offshore accounts. Money meant for scholarships redirected to a shell company owned by Edward Ashford, a name some of you might recognize from Evelyn's personal life." Photographs slid across the table. Bank statements, travel records. The evidence was irrefutable. Evelyn shot to her feet. "This is absurd. You forged..." "Independently verified by 3 forensic accountants. The originals are with the State Attorney General's office as of this morning." The halo of moral superiority Evelyn had worn for decades cracked and shattered. Around the room, donors who'd praised her philanthropy stared in horror. "My third gift," Sharon's voice finally wavered, "is for the father of my child." She placed the medical documents on the table in front of Richard. Ultrasound images, doctor's confirmation, conception date that aligned perfectly with their last night together before the false accusations began. "I'm 11 weeks pregnant. I didn't tell you because I was afraid you'd see our baby as another manipulation. But tonight, this child deserves to be acknowledged." Richard stared at the ultrasound image, his hands trembling. The timeline crashed through his mind. The affair that never happened, the lies he'd believed, the wife he'd exiled while she carried his child. "Sharon, His voice broke. "Oh God, what have I done?" The room erupted. Evelyn's denials turning to panic, board members demanding explanations, guests backing away from the matriarch who'd controlled them all through fear and status. Sharon turned away from the chaos, from Richard's devastated face, from Evelyn's crumbling empire. Tears finally spilled down her cheek, but they weren't tears of defeat. They were release, freedom, the end of disappearing. She'd come to this family powerless. She was leaving this moment unbroken. The next 72 hours moved in a blur of crisis management, emergency board meetings, lawyers descending like hawks, foundation donors demanding explanations, the Attorney General's office opening formal investigations, and Evelyn collapsing in her suite. Whether from genuine stress or theatrical desperation, no one was quite sure. An ambulance, hospital monitors, doctors whispering about blood pressure and cardiac episodes while Richard stood frozen between the woman who raised him and the woman carrying his child. On the third day, Richard finally entered his mother's private hospital room alone. No lawyers, no witnesses, just a son confronting the woman who'd taught him everything except how to see clearly. "You destroyed my marriage," he said quietly. "You manufactured evidence. You stole from the foundation. You turned me into someone who didn't believe the woman I love." Evelyn's voice was weak but still sharp. I was protecting you. No, the word was final. You were controlling me. There's a difference. He stood. When you're released, you'll move to the Connecticut estate. You'll have comfort, care, staff, but not access to the foundation, not access to my home, and limited supervised access to my child. Those are the terms. Take them or lose me entirely. Richard, I'm choosing my wife, Mother. I should have done it months ago. The months that followed were slow, painful reconstruction. Richard arranged transparent audits of every foundation account, installed independent oversight, entered individual therapy to understand how he'd been manipulated, attended couples counseling where a patient therapist made him listen, truly listen, to the wife he'd nearly destroyed. Sharon, now visibly pregnant, refused to pretend everything was fine. You believed I was having an affair rather than trusting who I am, she said in one session, her hand resting on her rounded belly. That doesn't heal with apologies. It heals with time and changed behavior. Richard proved it in small, consistent ways. He stopped deferring to his mother's judgment. He asked Sharon's opinion on business decisions and actually implemented her ideas. He sat with her through morning sickness and midnight cravings, present in ways he should have been all along. When Sharon insisted on a real role in Witzel Holdings, board meetings, strategic planning, active leadership, he didn't just agree. He championed it. 6 months later, the penthouse had transformed again. Warm throws returned. Family photos lined the walls. A nursery painted in soft greens and golds, where Richard rocked their daughter, Elena, at 3 a.m. while humming off-key lullabies. Evelyn lived in the Connecticut estate, comfortable but distant. She was allowed supervised video calls with her granddaughter once a week, contingent on respect and boundaries. Some weeks, she earned them. Other weeks, she didn't. On a June afternoon, Richard and Sharon stood in the garden of a restored brownstone they'd bought together. Their choice, their home. Elena played on a blanket nearby, watched over by Sharon's mother, who'd moved closer to help with the baby. A small gathering of true friends surrounded them as they renewed their vows. I promise to believe you first, Richard said, his voice steady, to protect our marriage from poison whispers, to never confuse the empire with what actually matters. I promise to speak my truth even when it's hard, Sharon replied. To demand respect, not just love, and to remember that real partnership means equal voices, equal power, equal trust. Elena squealed, and they both laughed, breaking the solemnity. Later, as sunset painted the garden gold, Richard pulled Sharon close. Thank you for not giving up. On us. On me. Thank you for finally choosing us. They'd built their marriage twice now, once on romantic illusion, once on hard-won truth. The second version was messier, more complicated, but it was real, and real, Sharon had learned, was worth fighting for. The end. My beautiful family, you stayed. You witnessed Sharon's pain, her strength, her victory. That means everything. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Subscribe to Penthouse Diaries and turn on that notification bell, because every week, we tell stories of women who were broken but refused to stay broken. Women who were silenced but found their voices. Women like Sharon. Women like you. Hit the like button if you believe women deserve respect, not just love. Share this story with every wife, sister, daughter, and mother who needs to hear it. Your share could save someone's spirit today. Tell me in the comments, what was your favorite moment? Was it when Sharon laid out those 3 gifts? When Richard finally chose her? Or when Evelyn's empire crumbled? I read every single comment, and your words give me strength to keep writing. And if you watched until this very moment, write, I stood with Sharon, so I know you were here. Remember, my family, real love demands respect. Real partnership means equal voices. And real strength is knowing when to fight and when to set boundaries. Until next time, may your homes be filled with truth, your hearts with courage, and your lives with people who choose you every single day. This is Penthouse Diaries, and you are my most beautiful community. Don't forget, subscribe, like, and share. Let's lift more women together.